Welcome back to Act 4 of Deconstructing Directing, Text, Playwrights, and Dramaturgy. I'm Andrew Robler, the founder and archivist here, and I am so glad that you are here. So far in Act 4, we've been looking at the idea of script analysis. In Scene 1, we talked about why script analysis matters, and in Scene 2, we explored a number of different approaches to analyzing a script. In Scene 3, we're going to get a bit more focused and look at the concepts of genre and style in more detail. Genre and style are terms that are often used interchangeably, but they are not synonyms. Specificity is always important, but particularly in understanding the difference between these ideas. Genre is a category of composition that is defined or characterized by similarities in form, style, and/or subject matter. Notice that this definition includes the term style, but only as a subset of what makes up a genre. Think of it in terms of beverages. Genre is the kind of beverage, while style is the type of cup we drink it out of. There are certain drinks that are partially defined by their vessel, such as yerba mate, ramune soda, or a martini. But there are plenty of drinks that can be enjoyed out of many different types of cups, glasses, mugs, or if you're feeling adventurous, through a crazy straw hat. There are definitely some drinks that are more enjoyable when drunk out of a particular vessel. I wouldn't want to drink hot coffee out of a glass cup without a handle, for instance. But the vessel doesn't necessarily define the beverage. And, just like with beverages, genres and styles are culturally informed. What's normal in one culture may be deeply strange in another, and vice versa. It's also important to understand the difference between prescriptive and descriptive norms. Prescriptive norms are those which culturally prescribe or require a particular way of doing something, such as using a particular type of straw and vessel when drinking a yerba mate, or using masks in Japanese no theater. Violating these norms can not only be confusing, but can be seen as deeply disrespectful of the culture that has established them. Descriptive norms are those which have become norms because enough people have followed them, but are less strict, such as the size of a coffee cup or the presence of a mustachioed villain in a melodrama. Violating these norms can still cause plenty of confusion, but may be more easily accepted than violations of prescriptive norms. So, why do genre and style matter to us as directors? Because just like when it comes to drinking a beverage, we need to be able to identify the beverage and the vessel so that we can make intentional decisions about how, why, and when we lean into, translate, or transform those norms in our work. Thinking back to the flame paradigm, the F stands for facilitation. And when we discussed that in depth in Act 1, Scene 2, we talked about the role of a director as facilitator also being like a translator, helping those who speak different artistic languages communicate with one another. Understanding genre and style is immensely helpful in that part of our job specifically, but it actually impacts all 5 parts of flame, and we'll circle back around to how as we move through this scene. So let's explore theatrical genres, or the kind of beverage we are consuming, a bit more. Genre shapes the structure, stakes, pacing, and audience expectations of a particular story. It's a type of social contract. If I tell you that the play is a comedy, you probably expect to laugh regularly while watching it, or at least be amused by it. The A part of our job in the flame paradigm, artistic insight and taste, is about serving as an audience surrogate and making sure that we consider the audience's expectations. That doesn't mean that we have to meet them. Sometimes subverting expectations can be a powerful choice. But to make that choice intentionally, we first have to understand the what and why of the social contract inherent in genre. So let's break down some common genres, along with some of the key elements that would be most helpful to understand as part of our analysis work early in our process. First, we'll explore some Western genres in no particular order. Comedy. In modern times, we generally think of comedy as being funny, but the original definition is simply that the main conflict of the story resolves in a positive outcome that unifies those who were opposed, or provides some sort of positive release. In comedy, the timing and escalation of energy is particularly important. There are also a number of subgenres to comedy, including but not limited to farce, which features exaggerated characters, improbable situations, mistaken identities, and rapid entrances and exits. As directors, we need to consider precision, physicality, timing, and clarity in both speech and movement. Example shows include Noises Off, Servant of Two Masters, and The Play That Goes Wrong. Farce is also often considered both a style and a genre, as is satire, which uses humor irony and exaggeration to critique politics, society, or institutions. As directors, we need to have a clear understanding of the target of the satire, control the tone carefully, and steer pacing to include both laughs and bite. Example shows include Urinetown and Avenue Q. Parody mimics a recognizable style, genre, or work for the purpose of humor. As directors, we especially need to understand the material that is being parodied. Example shows include the complete works of William Shakespeare Abridged Revised and Spamalot. Romantic comedy focuses on, surprise, romantic relationships with obstacles, misunderstandings, and eventually ending up together. As directors, we need to be mindful of the chemistry between actors and the balance of emotional sincerity and comedy. Example shows include Much Ado About Nothing, She Loves Me, and Barefoot in the Park. Dark or black comedy finds humor in taboo, bleak, or uncomfortable topics. As directors, we need to focus carefully on the balance of humor and the pity or sadness inherent in the topics the play is addressing. Example shows include The Pillowman, Crimes of the Heart, and Fleabag. Absurdist comedy derives its humor from things like meaninglessness, the failure of language, and existential dread. As directors, we need to find the emotional truth in the illogic of the story and ensure that rhythm and pacing are clear. Example shows include Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, The Bald Soprano, and Waiting for Godot. Don't worry if this is already starting to get a little overwhelming. We'll have a handout with the breakdown for you for free in the usual place. All right, let's move on to drama. Unlike in a comedy where conflict resolves into a unification or release, the conflict in a drama usually results in some form of growth or lesson learned, with less emphasis on humor. This is not to say that dramas cannot be funny. Some of the best dramas are quite funny, but that's not usually their primary goal. Understanding the emotional progression of the characters and the story overall is especially important in drama. Then we have tragedy. This is essentially the opposite of comedy, and the conflict of the story usually results in one or more characters dying or experiencing some other form of severe loss or downfall. There's often a focus on fate, and the goal is often catharsis, or the release of strong emotions. Tragedy is the type of story we might watch when we really need to cry so that we can feel better. And tragedy often uses formal language or structure. Then there's mystery or thriller. These stories rely on the development of tension and withholding information from the audience and or the characters, followed by some form of reveal. In this genre, blocking and timing of lines along with environmental design cues like lighting and sound is particularly important. Next, we have musical theater. This may seem obvious, but musicals tell a story through song and dance and often involve heightened emotions. We'll talk more about musicals specifically near the end of this scene as they're often particularly complex. While it's easy to focus solely on these Western genres, of which there are plenty more, we don't have a monopoly on art, theater, or genre. So here are a few genres from around the world that you may or may not be familiar with. Japanese No. This is a highly formalized genre and style of theater involving masks, minimal movement, symbolic props, and chanting. It emphasizes atmosphere and spiritual resonance more than it does plot. Indian Kathakali, a stylized dance drama that uses particular gestures called mudras along with facial expressions to express emotion and character along with intricate costuming. The stories themselves are often based in epic Hindu stories of the past. Indonesian wayang kulit. This is a type of shadow puppetry with live narration and a type of music called gamelan music, which is played by an ensemble of primarily percussion instruments. The stories skew moral and philosophical. West African griot storytelling. A griot is the term for a type of oral historian, storyteller, and musician in West African traditions. They typically blend narrative, music, and improvisation, focusing on community history, satire, and morality in their storytelling. Indigenous coyote tales and story cycles. Indigenous tribes based in the Americas often tell stories that have a cyclical structure, trickster figures, and multiple meanings that are intended to help transmit culture and encourage self and communal reflection. These are only a sample of the many genres of storytelling and live performance around the world, and it can be incredibly meaningful and valuable to us as directors to study them and expand our perspective. It's important to note, however, that many of these non-Western genres developed in spite of and or in response to colonialism. So if we are inspired to work cross-culturally, that is a beautiful thing, but the recklessly kind way to do so is to ensure that we partner with artists from those cultures so that we can ensure that we are not co-opting or continuing to colonize their traditions. So now that we've talked about the beverages themselves, or the genres, let's explore the vessels that they can come in, the theatrical styles. Styles, which can contribute to the definition of some genres, are about the tone and rhythm of the live performance, the approach to the elements of design in the performance, and the relationship of the audience to the performance. Similar to our overview of genres, we'll break this down into some sample Western and non-Western styles, starting with the Western styles we may be more familiar with. First is realism. This style originated in the 19th century and focused on the psychological believability of the story and characters, trading the poetic dialogue of classical theater like Shakespeare for dialogue that sounds like everyday speech. It tends to focus on relationships, the presence of subtext, and human behavior. This is perhaps the most common style of Western theater, in part due to the work of Stanislavski, who was the first to kind of codify realism as a style of acting. Naturalism. If realism is focused on relationships between characters, naturalism tends to focus on the relationship between the environment and the characters. If you've ever seen a play where someone actually cooks something on stage, then you've seen an element of naturalism. This style seeks to replicate reality as completely as possible on stage, eliminating the need for actors to pretend to be doing anything and instead actually doing it. Design and dramaturgy are especially important for directors to understand in this style. Absurdism. This style focuses on the idea that trying to create meaning or significance is pointless, that truth is chaos, and that we do not need to have a driving purpose. Samuel Beckett is one of the most well-known writers in this style, and the theater of the absurd is a good example of a style that is also essentially a genre itself. Understanding the internal emotional clarity of characters is crucial for directors in this style. Surrealism and expressionism. This style is rooted in breaking a lot of the rules of realism and naturalism, trading realistic design and relationships for intentionally unrealistic approaches, usually that reflect the character's internal emotions and struggles. There is some overlap between absurdism, surrealism, and expressionism in theater. Clear communication with designers is crucial, as is being able to articulate what is being represented by the unrealistic design and structure. As with genres, we have a style handout in the usual place that you can reference at your convenience. So as you listen to, watch, or read this scene, try to absorb what you can and come back to it if you start to get overwhelmed. So let's close out our conversation about style with some non-Western examples. Presentational performance. In this style of performance, the actors are aware of the audience, meaning that there's no fourth wall that separates them. This is a style of performance that exists in Western theater as well, especially historically. Soliloquies in Shakespeare as originally performed are one example of this, but are particularly common in non-Western cultures. Codified gesture. This is the use of particular gestures to communicate meaning, such as emotion or character, such as in Kathakali in India, Beijing opera in China, and Japanese Noh theater. Movement is incredibly specific and layered in meaning. Ritual or ceremonial. This style approaches theater as an offering or invocation. The structure may be cyclical or nonlinear. Dance drama. Similar to codified gesture, dance drama styles embed narrative in particular movements rather than or in addition to in the delivery of text. And finally, polyphonic storytelling. This style emphasizes multiple voices speaking or singing at once, multiple themes occurring simultaneously, or non-linear approaches to time. This is common in indigenous storytelling. All right, now that we've explored some different genres and styles of theatrical storytelling, what's next? Earlier, we talked briefly about the fact that sometimes our goal is to undermine the expectations of an audience or surprise them, and modifying or combining genres and styles in different ways can be an effective way to do that. Some genres and styles align more naturally, such as realism and drama, or comedy and absurdism. Others may be more surprising, like tragedy being combined with absurdism, like in Waiting for Godot, or sci-fi being presented as realism, like in Marjorie Prime. Many modern plays defy easy categorization into a particular genre or style, allowing us as directors to explore and experiment with how we emphasize a particular style or genre norms in their presentation. So let's break down a couple of simple tools that can be useful. First, 4 key questions we can ask ourselves as we analyze the script are: does the text fit into a particular genre or genres? Does the playwright or cultural tradition imply or require a particular style? What do I want the audience to feel, question, or expect? And how can I help align the production team and cast on genre and style decisions? Next, here are some considerations as we plan for rehearsals, especially if we are playing with genre and/or style specifically. Finding a way to develop a shared vocabulary with your team can be important. Describing a play as absurdist may not be helpful if not everyone shares the same understanding of what that means. We'll cover how we can work together with a dramaturg effectively later in this act, but this is a great opportunity to do so. If we are working in a genre or style we're not as familiar with, it may be prudent to build in time for experimentation and play into our rehearsal process. I've seen many a show with great potential fall flat because it was clear that neither the cast nor the director really had the time to understand the needs of a genre or style fully. So don't rob yourself of that time. Pay extra close attention to shifts in tone and style, especially if you're combining genres or styles. These shifts are moments of instruction for the audience. If they aren't clear that a shift has happened, that can lead to confusion. And confused audiences spend their time trying to solve their confusion, not watching the show you've directed. Consider building a genre reference shelf or list that you can return to for examples of a particular genre when you have questions. We've started one for you as a worksheet down below so that you can add to it. As I mentioned earlier, musical theater is a genre and style that can be especially complex, so let's break it down a bit more fully. First, we have to acknowledge that the prevalence of music and singing in a musical changes the expectation of the audience. Songs are an externalization of interior thoughts and feelings in a unique way. Second, the score itself is part of the text, not just the lyrics. The rhythm and phrasing affect delivery and thus the communication of information. And motifs in the music can be similar to the role of subtext when we work with non-musical dialogue. For this reason, if we're not confident in our musical understanding, finding a skilled music director and working with them from very early on in the process is crucial. This applies to the choreographer as well if the musical is one that involves a lot of dance, as the style of the choreography can drastically change the show. Finally, just as we discussed above, transitions between the spoken dialogue and songs are particularly important to pay attention to directorially. If you've ever seen an actor awkwardly stand there after delivering a line while waiting for their musical entrance to start singing, then you know how much a poor transition can rob a show of its momentum. All right, let's recap. Genres, the beverages, and styles, the vessels you drink from, are not cages, they're tools that help us understand a show and our approach to it. Subverting an audience's expectations of a genre or style requires that we understand that genre or style first, so it's a valuable exercise to expose ourselves to different genres of theater, film, TV, and literature. And, speaking of tools, I promised that we'd look at how each part of the flame paradigm is affected by our understanding of genre and style. Facilitation needs us to be able to navigate differences in style or understanding of a genre in the rehearsal room or production meeting. Leadership, which is based in advocacy, means that we have to understand what the play needs and how we align everyone around it. Artistic insight and taste allows us to make intentional choices when we consider genre and style. Management needs, like scheduling rehearsals, are definitely impacted by the genre and style we are working in, and education/mentorship means that we can help our collaborators grow in their own understanding of genre and style when we take the time to consider it ourselves. All right, that's it for Act 4, Scene 3. As always, this content is truly and completely 100% free to you and will always be for as long as I can help it. That said, if you find it helpful and are able to support it financially, please consider joining my Patreon, which will allow you to set up a small monthly donation and earn some fun perks like stickers and more for helping to support this project financially. Even just $5 a month makes a huge difference. I'll see you again when you're ready to dive into the rest of Act 4. Until then, I challenge us all to be recklessly kind.